The truth on TJ Watt's future revealed. The Pittsburgh Steelers and TJ Watt have continued their negotiations regarding TJ's future in Pittsburgh. My name is Peyton Kleppe, and on today's episode of Steelers Digest, we'll be breaking down the latest Pittsburgh Steelers analysis and reports regarding the Pittsburgh Steelers football team. Before we get into the latest reports about TJ's contract, if you guys are not already currently subscribed to the channel, click that subscribe button down below. We are trying to get to 3,000 subscribers. But like I said, the Steelers and TJ Watt have a major, update regarding his negotiations with the team. I would never think the Pittsburgh Steelers would do this, but they have gone fishing, and they have decided that, hey, let's just see what we could get for TJ if we did ultimately decide to trade him. Noah Strockbein made an article about this, and he goes in depth on why the Pittsburgh Steelers would do this. I do think it's kind of a smart move, just to see what we could get for TJ. Ultimately, I don't think we will trade him. I really hope we don't trade him, but if worse comes to worse, if we could get a few first-round picks for him, it might be good for our future as we do look to rebuild and reload our team as we move forward. Unfortunately, TJ Watt is getting up there in age. He's 30 years old. He will be 31, I believe, October. I think his birthday is October 11th. If I'm wrong, correct me in the comments. But, he will be getting up there in age. And unfortunately, he has not had any playoff success in Pittsburgh. And, he's been on and off the field the last couple years. Obviously, if we flash back 2 years ago, he had 19 sacks, had an all-pro season, should have won his second Defensive Player of the Year. But we know how that goes. You know how the NFL loves to, snub TJ Watt, and they did give it to Myles Garrett, who really didn't deserve it, but that's how it goes nowadays in the NFL with the Pro Bowls, with the Defensive Player of the Year awards and stuff like that. It's more of a popularity contest rather than an actual, who's the actual best defensive player in the league. TJ Watt's been the best guy in the league for probably about 4 or 5 years now that Aaron Donald did ultimately retire. TJ Watt's been the best guy. No comparison. He has been the best. If you flash back all the way back to 2021 or 2022, actually no, 2021, TJ had 22 and a half sacks. I don't know anybody else that has done that since Michael Strahan in the early 2000s. I think Justin Houston got a little close to that in 2014, but nobody's gotten that close since, Michael Strahan, obviously, in the early 2000s. So it would be sad to see TJ Watt go, but depending on the return that we would get for him, it might be necessary for our team's future. If we do look at his brother's career, there was a similar situation where JJ was in Houston for the majority of his career, but at the end, he was definitely disgruntled, definitely not happy with the roster around him, and was definitely unhappy with the playoff success that he did have in Houston. But we did see how that played out. Sometimes the grass is not greener on the other side. JJ did sign with the Cardinals ultimately, dealt with some injuries, had 1 or 2 good seasons, but obviously didn't do anything really. So, if TJ Watt does get traded, we'll have to wait and see, but I don't think he would have any more success anywhere else he would go other than Pittsburgh, unless he does go to a contender, but I don't think the Pittsburgh Steelers would decide to trade TJ Watt to a team like the Bills or the Chiefs or, any AFC team like that. If we do trade him, it would probably be to an NFC team and probably be one of the low-tiered teams. A name that I've been hearing is Commanders for maybe Terry McLaurin and maybe throw a few picks in there. I wouldn't mind that. But, TJ Watt is our best defensive player, and our record without him is very bad. So I really don't want to see what happens without TJ Watt. I'd love to lock him down under contract, but obviously this dude wants a ton of money, and I do think there's the dispute about the length of the contract as well. TJ Watt might want a shorter or longer contract depending on, whether or not he wants to re-up in a few years moving down the line, or whether or not he decides that, hey, in these next couple of years, I'm probably going to retire. So it's definitely something to monitor. But, like I said, if we do look at his stats in the past couple of years, last year, TJ Watt definitely had kind of an up and down year. There was a few games where he didn't even record a stat, didn't really show up much. The Washington Commanders game, he had zeros across the board. And he was also injured for, I believe, 4 or 5 games at the end of the season last year, dealing with some knee injuries, some lower leg injuries, which, kind of has been TJ's kryptonite throughout his career. If we go back to his time in Wisconsin, There's definitely a notable quote from TJ where, he was dealing with a ton of injuries. His knee popped out of place in practice. He called up his dad and said, "Hey, Dad, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I might have to become a firefighter." Obviously, he didn't do that, and now he's become, the Hall of Famer TJ Watt, which I'm very thankful for. But, history does repeat itself, and unfortunately, TJ has been dealing with some knee injuries throughout his career. But, if we go back 2 years, like I said, dude looked awesome, 19 and a half sacks. Year before that, 2022, dealt with a torn pec, missed a few games, but still also did record 2 interceptions. So that was a cool year for TJ. Although his sack numbers were down, he did get 2 interceptions. One was a crazy interception against the Bengals where at the line, TJ Watt jumped up, snagged the ball from Joe Burrow. Ultimately, we did go on to lose that game, but super cool, notable play that, I'll always remember from a guy like TJ Watt. But, some reasons why we could trade away TJ is, bringing in a guy like Jack Sawyer in the draft, Captain Jack, a guy who's just coming off a national championship win, got some great intangibles, 6'4", 260, great pass rusher. And I think with the right development and coaching and, if you can stay healthy, stay on the field, I think Jack Sawyer is going to be the next great Jack in Pittsburgh. Following guys like Jack Ham, Jack Lambert, we got ourselves another Jack in Captain Jack Sawyer, who I'm very excited for. I'm very excited to see how he plays in preseason. I think he does have a chance to go off like Nick Herbig did a few years ago and really show that, let's get another great pass rusher in Pittsburgh. Let's get 4 pass rushers that we can use. TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, Nick Herbig, and Captain Jack Sawyer. So I'm very excited for Jack Sawyer. If the Steelers do decide to trade TJ Watt, we will have some depth behind him. But with a guy like with a guy like Jack Sawyer, and obviously the young TJ, the mini TJ coming out of Wisconsin in Nick Herbig, a guy who I'm super excited about, a guy who I think is only going to get an increased role as we do move forward in his career and has had a ton of success when he's on the field. Nick Herbig, this dude he's got a great arsenal of moves. He's a fast pass rusher. He can do all the hand fighting. He can do whatever you need to get to the quarterback. If we do look at his stats from a few years ago, dude had 3.5 sacks his rookie year. I believe had a few forced fumbles, but then last year really showed up, had 5.5 sacks, had I believe 4 or 5 forced fumbles. Whenever he did get to that quarterback, he was chopping down on that arm and making sure to force that fumble. So, I do think the Pittsburgh Steelers are in a good position by gauging, trade interest with TJ Watt, but we will have to wait and see as training camp does, come up on the horizon, whether or not TJ Watt will report or he will continue his holdout. But unfortunately, that is all I have for you guys today on Steelers Digest. If you guys are not already currently subscribed to the channel, click that subscribe button down below. Thank you so much. Here we go, Steelers. Peace out, dudes.